Parents of bullies, what did you do when you found out your kid was a bully? Story 1. I adopted a kid through the foster system when he was 10 years old, and let me tell you, he had picked up some bad habits from his abusive biological parents. Good parenting uses consistent rewards and punishments to establish a link between behavior and consequences. But when abuse and neglect happen without any action from the kid, the thing they learn is how to defend themselves when things go down. He tried very hard to divert attention and avoid topics, but when that failed, he would often threaten others, mostly me and my wife, out of panic because that's how he saw his dad solve problems. The hardest part was getting him to see the connection between bullying behavior and its consequences, both for himself and others. There were a few incidents at school, but we thankfully kept him out of too much trouble. There was a moment when my wife was just walking through the room, and he hurled deeply misogynistic comments at her. She hadn't done anything. He was mad about something else, and took it out on her. He had been in therapy a few years at this point, and was making some real progress, but he still had moments like this, seemingly out of nowhere, and he couldn't explain why they were happening, not because he was being evasive, but because he honestly couldn't connect the dots. Instead of threatening punishment for this situation, I asked him if he wanted to grow up to be an abuser like his bio dad. He said no. I told him that his mom and I didn't want that either, and that's why we were trying to stop him from acting like that. It was abusive behavior. That clicked for him. He broke down and ugly cried for about 20 minutes. He truly disliked himself for those 20 minutes. We sat by him and let him cry, then told him that we loved him. He was never a bully again. He still made a few bad decisions, but never out of a desire to hurt anyone. Now he's 23 and has more empathy than many of the older adults I know. It's still a struggle for him to understand why people feel the way they do sometimes, but he's always understanding when others are hurting. Answer: we have been fostering for 9 years now and have 4 adopted kids. Our oldest dislike women. Really, he dislikes his mother, but he takes it out on all women. We were never able to help him with that. I wish we could have because he would be so much happier right now. Our youngest, now 18, really struggles with being empathetic. So every time she tells me a story about how someone was annoying or did something stupid, I take it as an opportunity to help her see the other side. She has stopped being actively unkind to people, even if she does find them annoying or stupid, which is something. But I hope there is a day where, instead of being annoyed, she could be a bit more empathetic and maybe even kind. Story 2. I am not the parent of a bully, but my brother was a bully. When my dad found out about it, he was pulled out of school, off his sports team, and was homeschooled for the rest of the year, then went to go stay with Grandpa for the summer. Effectively, he was bear grounded. When he went back to school the next year, he did not bully anyone. Story 3. My mom made my brother wear school uniforms every single fudge day for the remainder of the school year. I should add an important detail. It was a normal public high school. Nobody wore uniforms, LOL. He was given the option before the next school year started. Keep being a bad kid. Keep wearing those navy blue slacks and that same white-collared shirt every single day. Or do better, and you can wear whatever the fudge you want like everyone else. He straightened right the fudge up after that year. Story 4. My nephew got in trouble for picking on a kid at school, and when my sister found out, she made him write a letter of apology, deliver it in person, and then volunteer to help the janitor clean during recess for a week. She told him if he had that much energy to make someone else feel bad, he could use it to be useful instead. He was pissed, but yeah, it worked. Sometimes consequences just gotta hit where it stings like recess. Story 5. Reading this thread looking for hope because my friend is a great guy and his kid seems normal, but is a fudge sociopath at school. They've tried everything, They're at the end of their rope. Edit. A typo. Answer. How old is their child? 3 to 10-year-olds can be insane, ESP, if they are developmentally behind in certain areas. They will catch up, but due to many factors often have delayed social awareness, emotional regulation, language skills, and there are so many other factors that impact. Even just being COVID kids who were infants, 5-year-olds during lockdowns, can have major impacts on social behaviors and limited empathy, etc. 10 to 16-year-olds also are really hard years, all dependent on certain circumstances. Neurodevelopmental disorders often cause developmental delays in one or multiple areas. Early intervention is best. Also, PTSD and trauma, like family violence or parents separating, moving house or country, or loss of a close family member, can all cause sometimes minor, sometimes bigger developmental delays. If they can, try and see a child psych for a behavioral assessment. Pediatricians are okay for this, but if it's developmental, psychs and OTs are really important. Story 6. Friend had this happen with her daughter. When she started kindergarten, there were some big life changes. Her parents had newborn twins and fought a lot, which led to a very ugly divorce. Their daughter started talking back to teachers and saying mean things to other kids. It all culminated in her getting kicked out of kindergarten for hitting. Thankfully, the parents realized their kid was in distress and put their stuff aside to work together. They got her into therapy and read a lot of books to her about not hurting others. Change didn't happen overnight, but she's learned emotional regulation skills and is doing well in her mid-teens. I'm proud of both parents for stepping up and learning to co-parent in a healthy way that's best for their kids. Story 7. Not a bully, but this is a fun story, and I think speaks to how our parents would have been if any of us were bullies. My brother is autistic, fairly independent, but I would say most people could catch on pretty quick. He didn't deal with a lot of bullies in high school, fortunately, but occasionally my cousin would pick on him. He's a year older, and when I say pick on, I mean in a very brotherly way. However, not everyone knew they were cousins. So one day, my cousin is picking on my brother, and this absolutely jacked senior football player gets right up in my cousin's face and goes, "You messing with him?" My cousin curled up in a little ball and meekly said, "We're cousins. I'll stop. Please don't hurt me." Dude said, "Oh, didn't know. No prob." And fortunately, my cousin did not get beat up that day. But later, when he told his parents, they laughed their jerk off and said, "Well, you better not pick on your cousin or anyone else for that matter." Basically, our whole family took as being super happy there were folks looking out for my brother. Answer. Halfway through, I was like, yeah, no one bullied the nice fellas in my school. And the rest took me back to the high school. I was part of that group. It first started when we made sure that my friend's little brother wouldn't be bullied when he came to the same school. Little later, we made sure that people who just wanted to be left alone were left alone. Pretty sure we made some impact in those couple of years. I don't like violence. It's the last resort I would use. But a few of my friends doesn't think the same way. Whenever we went to de-escalate something and they started to be aggressive, suddenly there was 5 times more people behind me just looking for an excuse to punch someone. That made people usually stop their bullshit. Story 8. So we are parents on a son that was bullied in middle school. The teacher actually scheduled a meeting with the parents. One mom refused to show and told the teacher, "My son needs to toughen up." The other parents showed. The mom felt so ashamed. She cried and told us it was going to change. It did. The bully completely changed. The mom would text us checking in to make sure. I became friends with her. Amazing parents. They corrected the behavior and didn't make excuses. Now the other kid, I feel bad for. He is your textbook I bully because my parents are bullies. Our kids have graduated high. school last year and this kid has a hard life. Parents are wealthy and dislike people. The kid actually reached out to my son and asked if he would game with him, so my son has become friends with him, and the kid has since apologized. He's told my son about his upbringing and, well, it's like what you would think. Answer: my mother somehow found the address of one of my bullies when I was 10-11 years old, and it just so happened to be opposite the school entrance. I was in the car when my mom went in the house, and I honestly thought my mom was being beat up the amount of noise and movement I saw from outside. I think it was about 20 minutes later, which felt like an eternity, when the dad and the bully came out to me. The dad was a tough-looking guy and very apologetic of his daughter's disgusting behavior. She was ugly, crying and wailing in a manner she was upset but did not want to apologize. Like, "Why is this happening to me? I didn't do anything." Her dad was giving her a long list of punishments, being grounded and all sounds, and she let about a wail of apology like she was a wounded hippo hit by a car. Honestly, she was pathetic, and I'd like to say it stopped me from being scared of her, but she and her friend had been terrorizing me for a few months, threatening to cut me with scissors and eliminate my cat, and such. She was a nasty piece of work, mainly because she was tall and had long hair, which her dad was threatening to have all cut off if he ever heard she was bad. Again, my mom said afterwards she was worried about what household she would find there. She was a teacher herself, and said her parents were actually very ashamed and shocked about how vain and cruel their daughter had been. Unfortunately, luckily, my mother is the kind of person who is brilliant in words to make your feelings the worst person in the world by saying things in a certain way, and it definitely worked here on the parents, and especially the bully. The only time the bully spoke properly was when my mom asked her to apologize properly and use words rather than wails to something like that. I know she still attended that school still, but that bully stayed so far away from me till I finished, I forgot she existed. Sadly, I had a long history of being bullied, and would be bullied in my teens too, which I kept from my mother more because of embarrassment, as well as my mom drinking too much. So half the time she was very mean about anything I'd mention. Edit spelling. Story 9. I found out from a parent their daughter didn't like something my son was doing at the bus stop, so I marched his jerk over to their house, read him the riot act all the way there, made him apologize to the daughter, made him tell her he'd never do it again. Then I told her if he did, she was to have her parents contact me, and then it definitely would never happen again. I don't recall if was still angry enough to read my son the riot act on the way home. Answer: the rough way to phrase this is public embarrassment, but I truly am a big fan of putting kids in situations where they can be checked by the rest of society. I'm a teacher, so I've also started to name it when my older elementary students are behaving in absolutely insane ways, especially post-COVID, when they didn't have those social norms during some of their formative years. I try to keep calm and objective, but I tell them straight up, if you act like this in public, people will think you're weird, and not in a funny way. If you just randomly go to the grocery store and start screaming inappropriate phrases you heard on YouTube, things will not go your way in life. I actually do think that it helps some kids to realize it this year, and hopefully, they won't have to learn it the harder ways in middle and high school. Story 10. We made him own it. Apologized in person, talked a lot about empathy, and got him into therapy. It wasn't about punishment, it was about helping him figure out why he did it. He's come a long way since. Story 11. My kids aren't bullies, but they've sure had moments of bullying. One shoved a kid on the bus thinking that kid had pushed him first. Come to find out, the bus was the Wild West that school year, and our eldest was overstimulated. made them write the kid an apology letter, made them sit at the front of the bus the rest of the year, and as soon as they were old enough, had them start walking to school to avoid the overstimulation. They are now known as a kid that brings other kids into their group and welcomes all new kids, but I just addressed it head on. Story 12. When mine started bullying and grounding didn't work, we ended up involving his pediatrician to get resources to help, and resulted in a diagnosis. It was a long, difficult process, but now he's a totally different kid. He's super kind and helpful, and constantly gets comments about how sweet he is and how much of an awesome role model he is. Sometimes they're just needing some help and don't know how to ask for it. Story 13. My nephew was coming home regularly crying about how a group of boys kept on picking on him. My sister kept pushing and pushing, only to find out my nephew was actually name-calling and being a general bully to everyone in class, and some of the classmates were just standing up for themselves. Yes, he was diagnosed with autism and ADHD and worked on not being a jerk in general shortly thereafter, but as his family, we thought he was the victim, but in reality, he was the bully. Story 14. My kids have never bullied kids outside of the house that I know of. But my middle kid has bullied my younger one, and whenever he gets caught and called out, he attempts to justify all his actions, minimizes his actions, or attempts to make himself the victim. It's beyond normal sibling rivalry. We come from a domestic violence background where he learned a lot of one parent's behavior and littler brother learned a lot of the other parent's behavior. What I finally did that made the biggest difference was ask him to research specific terms like psychological abuse, emotional abuse, reactive abuse, and DARVO. He loves to do independent research, and he questions everything. So, having him independently research was a way for him to find information from an unbiased third party. He was horrified after he read about those things and said, "I am doing almost all of this to little brother." He asked me what to do to fix it. I told him I would help him research what to do to fix it and help him implement it. He did the work. Now, when he falls back into those behaviors, we revisit what's in the realm of normal sibling stuff versus what is bullying and potentially abusive behavior. It's a lot of redirection, but we call it what it is. Acknowledge that everyone has setbacks and can't have perfect behavior. I most certainly can't, even as an adult. But the important thing is to fully acknowledge when we have behavior that is hurtful to others, apologize for it, and then to work to make a repair. We did do therapy for a few years as well. One of the suggestions was to try to get him to see how his behaviors were affecting those around him, and to try to do it in a way that would stick out him to try to build empathy. Story 15. As a teacher, allowed to respond for too many parents. Not my child. She never acts like that at home. I don't know why you're bullying my child. You must be thinking of a different child. If different race than child, add, you're racist. I'm going to complain to and get you fired. Answer. It really is insane to me how adversarial parents are towards teachers nowadays. I'm only in my late 20s, but when I acted up at school and it found its way back to my folks, there were consequences for my actions. I really wonder what caused this sudden shift in parental attitudes that has made them so combative towards teachers. It really seems to be a widespread issue. I used to want to be a teacher when I was younger, but things like this make me glad that didn't work out. I'm sorry that the climate around teaching is so horrible. You deserve better. You all do. Story 16. Not a parent, but an older sister to an impressionable autistic dude by intellectual disability. Heard him on video call using the N-word, he is white, referring to literal babies BC. His friends thought it was funny. He must have thought I didn't hear him through his door, I opened the door immediately and told him loudly enough for all his friends to hear, verbatim, to never, ever say shoot like that again, and that his friends were losers and idiots for thinking it's funny. Never did it again. He was mad at me for a hot minute for embarrassing him, but he never said it again. Not when he knew I was around anyways. Still think he's afraid to call anybody when I'm around him. Story 17. Not a parent. Uncle to many of my siblings' kids. Nephew and kid got into a fight, shoving no punching. Freshman in high school, like 14 or 15 years old. They got into it, and the kid said something about my nephew having no dad. His dad is a deadbeat and not around, but no idea how this kid knew that LOL. My nephew started mouthing off and called him a Mexican. Small town in the Midwest. School less than 1K kids. Almost no minorities. I grew up here as well, super gay and out since I was a kid. My nephew's BFFs at the time, a black kid and a Hispanic kid. This blew my mind. Talked to him, yelled at him, reasoned with him. He just could not understand why I was mad he got suspended for calling the kid out for being Mexican. I had to pick him up from school because his mom and grandma were both working. Sister lives WR mom. I took away his phone I had on my plan paid for. He threw a fit. It was for the few days he was suspended plus a few days, like a week or less. Not a big deal, but it's been a couple years and I've since slowly but surely been discarded in his life. TLDR, teenage nephew was racist during an otherwise inconsequential incident I tried to reason with and discipline him, and it was a catalyst for him not speaking to me anymore. Story 18. One of my friends told me about their daughter. My friend and I share an abusive past, and she found out her 8YO daughter was bullying kids at school. She took her out of school and homeschooled her for a year. Her daughter idolized JoJo Siwa, and apparently JoJo had a huge anti-bullying theme going on at that time, so she leveraged that in her favor. Her daughter would now be a teen, but my friend dropped off Facebook for safety reasons. She lives in a very conservative Texas area, so I am not sure how it's working out. Story 19. My child is adopted. They had a very hard life growing up young, and I came into their life at age 7. It wasn't so bad in elementary school. They were actually being bullied, and I helped as much as I could along with their dad. Once they went to middle school, the tables turned, and after a couple calls from the principal, I sat them down. I said, "Do you want to be a mean person like the ones who treated you last year? Do you really want to go down this path? Where is this anger coming from? Why hurt others?" We spoke, and they had a lot to say, even as a tiny human, but we always said, you can never be in trouble for speaking your feelings. They finally opened up, we moved on to therapy, and now my son is a wonderful, peaceful kid. Give your kids some grace and let them talk. Be quiet and give them time. You'll discover so much about your child and have a much better relationship with your child, especially if they have trauma. Story 20. When my daughter was bullied at school, grade 6, kids told her to go to another school. No one liked her, told her to eliminate herself, called her names. When the mom was told what was happening and her sweet innocent daughter, who could do no wrong, said, "Nope, wasn't me," Mom proceeded to threaten myself and my daughter. If I didn't do something about her, she would. So that parent threatened violence on an 11-year-old. Classy. Story 21. I have a kind of related story about bullying. I have a very autistic cousin who has the mental capacity of about an 8-year-old. She is a few years older than me, and we attended the same high school. Some useful context for the next part. She has a hard time remembering names, and we have a very large extended family. So when she shows up to family parties, she goes around the room and introduces herself and asks for everyone's names. "Hi, my name is Sarah. What's your name?" "Hi, Sarah. I'm your cousin, Jesse. Hi, Jesse. You're invited to my birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese. It's XCS. She invites everyone to her birthday party, even if it's 11 months from then, LOL. Anyways, her class was in the gym finishing up, and I had gym the very next period. While we were waiting for them to leave, I told my friends, "Hey, that's my cousin Sarah." They thought I was lying and telling me that it's rude and to stop picking on her. I tried to convince them that she was my cousin, but they didn't believe me and tell me to go say hi to her. So I confidently walk up to her and say, "Hey Sarah, how are you?" While completely forgetting her issue with names. She immediately hits me with, "Hi. What's your name?" My friends were furious with me, especially for bullying a special needs person. There was no way of explaining myself out of that. I had to go home and have my mom help me find a family picture of her, and I to prove to my friends that I'm not a jerk and we're actually related. I told my Aunt Sarah's mom about it, and she was almost on the floor laughing. It is still one of my aunt's favorite stories to share about 10 years later. It is super funny in hindsight, but my friends thought I was a bully for about 24 hours. Story 22. Not my kid, but my stepkid. He was being bullied pretty bad, but we finally got something done about it. He then started bullying another kid about his hair, told him to stop or I was going to cut his hair. Week later, the school called again, and I cut his hair. He never did it again. Well, that being said, he's now 25 and in jail awaiting trial for breaking a bottle over an 8-year-old girl's head and then stabbing her in the neck. Luckily, she's alive.